They shouldn't be playing Glastonbury.
Them to remove this
despicable evil which kneecap represents.
Absolutely not. Sorry, Nika.
Shame on Glastonbury.
Glastonbury, I'm a free man!
Good effort, Cammy. Hard lines in the elections, and onwards and upwards. Free Palestine.
Free! Palestine! Free! Palestine! Free! Palestine! Free! Palestine!
Hey Hitler, you probably didn't even hate the Jews. That was just a meth making you crazy, dog.
Both of you, get back in the closet. You deserve a fucking ass whooping. All of you, get back in the closet. Go fuck yourself.
How much does it cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
They're evil. They are actively doing evil. So treat them like the evil that they are.
The right to exist argument has been used now to the point where what it's going to mean is that the Israel you're talking about will include the annexed and illegally occupied West Bank. It's very interesting, the Israeli government has never said where it thinks all of Israel really ought to be and what it would settle for. I think it would be an immense help if it tells us where it thinks Israel's boundaries should be. Every other country does do that.
It's time to stop pretending otherwise. It's time to be ruthless and time to afford them the same amount of grace that they give to their Palestinian victims, because they are only going to get more and more ruthless with their victims if you don't.
Hey, what's up? Mic check 1, 2. Check 1. Start with headlines and then go into more specific stories here. I want to find like the full Democracy Now! Episodes that are like 40 minutes long.
Or the War and Peace Report, I'm Nermeen Sheikh. A column of Israeli tanks pushed further into the outskirts of Gaza City overnight, shelling Palestinian homes and prompting terrified residents to flee. The offensive came as Israeli attacks across the Gaza Strip killed at least 17 people, while medical workers reported 4 more deaths from famine and malnutrition over the past 24 hours, including 2 children. That brings the total number of starvation-related deaths in Gaza to 317. This comes as new research published in The Lancet finds nearly a third of outpatients treated by the medical charity Médecins Sans Frontières in its Gaza field hospitals were children under the age of 15. MSF warns that explosive weapons designed to be used in open battlefields are increasingly being used to target Palestinians in urban areas. At the United Nations, 14 of the Security Council's 15 members issued a joint statement Wednesday calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all hostages held by Hamas and other groups, a surge of humanitarian aid, and for Israel to immediately and unconditionally lift all restrictions on aid delivery. Only the United States opposed the statement. Guyanese diplomat Trishula Persod spoke to reporters, flanked by other UN ambassadors demanding an end to Israel's siege.
We note that at least 41,000...
Did she say that the U.S. was the sole vote against?
To Israel, so only to immediately and unconditionally lift all restrictions on aid delivery. Only the United States opposed the statement. Guyanese diplomat Trishula Persod spoke to reporters, flanked by other UN ambassadors demanding an end to Israel's siege.
We note that at least 41,000 children are at heightened risk of death from malnutrition between now and June 2026. This is a man-made crisis. The use of starvation as a weapon of war is clearly prohibited under international humanitarian law. Famine in Gaza must be stopped immediately.
In California, police arrested 138 peaceful protesters Wednesday as they occupied the lobby of Senator Alex Padilla's offices in San Francisco to demand an end to U.S. arms shipments to Israel. Among those arrested were rabbis, spiritual leaders, and descendants of Holocaust survivors. Elsewhere, Jewish Voice for Peace held protests in the lobby of a Sacramento hotel where Senator Padilla was attending a conference, and outside Padilla's offices in San Diego. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, dozens of Jewish peace activists held an hours-long sit-in protest in the offices of California's other senator, Adam Schiff. Last month, Senators Padilla and Schiff voted against a resolution sponsored by Senator Bernie Sanders and backed by 24 members of the Democratic caucus that seeks to block arms sales to Israel. A Russian missile and drone attack on Kyiv overnight killed at least 15 people, including 4 children. It was the deadliest attack on the Ukrainian capital in weeks. Russian drones also hit Ukraine's energy infrastructure in several regions, leaving more than 100,000 Ukrainian homes without power. This comes as Ukrainian drones have also been striking Russian oil refineries, leading to surging oil prices and fuel shortages in Russia. Meanwhile, Ukraine has acknowledged that Russian forces have captured 2 villages in the eastern region of Dnipro for the first time in 3.5 years of war. One Ukrainian official told the BBC that this is the first Russian attack on such a large scale in the region. It came as President Trump has been trying to broker a ceasefire agreement between Russia and Ukraine. On Wednesday, the Kremlin said that it will not accept NATO troops stationed in Ukraine as part of any ceasefire deal. U.S. and Russian officials discussed energy deals during recent peace talks to end the war in Ukraine. I
wanted to play this. I think this is the video I was looking for. After
when we speak of genocide,
after the United States has been the sole vote of nay, time and time again, for a ceasefire, for letting in aid, for all these various proposals.
Very clear, when we speak of genocide, in no way do we hold Jews around the world responsible for Israel's actions. These are legal determinations.
Where is it? The caption was "Never forget." It's worth finding. Here it is.
Maybe for some we have the wrong nationality, the wrong faith, the wrong skin color. But we are humans, and we should be treated as such. Is there a UN charter for Israel that is different from the charter you all have? Tell us. Is there an international law for them, an international law for us? Do they have the right to kill, and the only right we have is to die? What the hell does Israel need to do more for this council to act under Chapter 7? What more can they do for this council to act under Chapter 7? Or will this council be the last place on earth that cannot recognize a threat to peace when they see it? When it is so glaring, so undeniable. You are witnessing the attempt to annihilate a nation, destroy a nation. It is not even hidden. It is in plain sight. Maybe for some we have the wrong nationality, the wrong faith, the wrong skin color.
Sorry for the clutter noise. What troubles me is the idea that he might be right. That this room will be the last place on earth for people to stand up to humanity. The final straw. The final vanguard. Of maintaining peace. And even they can't recognize a genocide when they see it. They're complicit. And if the United States can hold all of you back with one vote, then your system is broken.
According to Reuters, which reports the discussions took place during U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff's trip to Moscow earlier this month, as well as during the Trump-Putin Alaska summit on August 15th. One of the deals would involve ExxonMobil re-entering Russia's Sakhalin-1 oil and gas project. Exxon left Russia shortly after it attacked Ukraine in 2022, which prompted a wave of Western sanctions against Russia. The Wall Street Journal is also reporting that Exxon's CEO has discussed the company's return to Russia with President Trump in recent weeks. This comes as President Trump has hit India with tariffs of 50%, citing India's imports of Russian oil. In Minnesota, a shooter opened fire at a Catholic school in South Minneapolis Wednesday, killing 2 children and injuring 17 people. The shooter died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound at the scene after firing through the windows at students who were sitting in pews in the church. This is Weston Holsney, a 5th grader who described watching a friend get shot in the back. He spoke to the local TV station Fox 9.
Oh my God.
Shot in the back. He's in the hospital right now. It was super scary because, like, we've never practiced it in the church. We've only practiced it in the main school, so we really didn't know what to do. My friend, he was like laying on top of me, like making sure I was safe, and he got hit. So that was really brave of him.
And you have a neck on your neck?
Yeah, that was, I don't even know what it's from. Kind of looks like debris or something.
Police say the attacker legally purchased weapons used in Wednesday's mass shooting, including a rifle, a pistol, and a shotgun. Prior to the attack, the gunman showed off the weapons in a video uploaded to YouTube. The video has since been taken down. After headlines, we'll speak with Chris Brown, president of Brady, one of the oldest gun violence prevention organizations in the U.S. The White House said late Wednesday it had fired the director of the Centers for Disease Control, Susan Monares, after she refused to resign, saying her views were, quote, not aligned with the president's agenda of making America healthy again, unquote. Monares was confirmed by the Senate as CDC director less than a month ago. In a statement late Wednesday, her lawyers accused HHS and Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. of putting millions of lives at risk by firing career experts and seasoned scientists while weaponizing public health. They write, quote, when CDC Director Susan Monares refused to rubber stamp unscientific, reckless directives and fire dedicated health experts, she chose protecting the public over serving a political agenda. For that, she's been targeted, unquote. Meanwhile, 3 senior CDC officials resigned in protest Wednesday. Dr. Deb Hootie, Deputy Director for Program and Science and Chief Medical Officer at CDC, Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, Director of the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases, and Dr. Daniel Jernigan, Director of the National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases. In a resignation email, Dr. Hootie wrote, quote, for the good of the nation and the world, the science at CDC should never be censored or subject to political pauses or interpretations. Vaccines save lives. This is an indisputable, well-established scientific fact, unquote. The Food and Drug Administration has approved updated COVID vaccines for the fall season, with new restrictions on who can access booster shots. Under the FDA plan, COVID shots remain authorized for people who are 65 and older or at higher risk of severe disease from an infection. Younger adults would be eligible to receive shots only if they have underlying medical conditions, putting them at higher risk. The authorization still needs the approval of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. In June, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. fired all 17 of the committee's members and replaced them with vaccine skeptics. COVID-19 remains a major driver of disability and mortality in the United States, with over 44,000 COVID deaths reported last year. The Transportation Department announced Wednesday that it's taking over management of the district's Union Station from Amtrak. This comes after President Trump deployed thousands of National Guard troops to D.C., despite crime in the city being at its lowest level in decades. National Guard troops are reportedly conducting the duties of local park staffers due to DOJ cuts. They're spreading mulch and picking up trash. Meanwhile, a grand jury declined to indict the former Justice Department employee who threw a sandwich at one of the federal officers deployed to D.C. by President Trump. And prosecutors also failed to convince a grand jury to indict a woman who was accused of assaulting an FBI agent during an immigration raid in the city last month. Meanwhile, Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, a Democrat, on Wednesday had praise for Trump's crackdown, saying it's reduced crime in the district.
This federal surge has had a significant increase on crime in Washington, D.C., and we greatly appreciate the surge of officers that enhance what MPD has been able to do in this city.
Bowser's praise for the D.C. crackdown came as the mayor's office seeks to restore $1.1 billion cut from the district's budget by congressional Republicans earlier this year, and as the White House is dangling a $2 billion infrastructure proposal for what it called the, quote, beautification of the nation's capital. Mayor Bowser said Wednesday she supported the infrastructure plan, which civil rights leaders, including Reverend Al Sharpton, have condemned as cover for racial profiling. And the California Senate has unanimously passed a resolution that would probe the state's imports of crude oil extracted from the Amazon. The resolution also calls for an eventual end to California's reliance on these crude imports.
The Amazon is not just good for the communities that live there, but our climate here in California. California is dependent on the Amazon for temperature and rainfall regulation. In other words, our fates are linked. And I'm going to share a shocking stat. 50% of the oil exported from the Amazon ends up in California refineries.
This follows years of advocacy from indigenous groups in South America. In June, a high-level indigenous delegation from Ecuador's Amazon met with lawmakers in Sacramento and staged a protest near a Chevron refinery. Meanwhile, Ecuador and Peru are moving ahead to expand drilling in the Amazon. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Nermeen Sheikh in New York, joined by Amy Goodman in Telluride, Colorado. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Nermeen, and welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.
From New York and Telluride, Colorado, this is Democracy Now!
And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying. It was the first week of school. They were in a church.
Million to evacuate. This week marks the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, the 2005 storm that devastated the Gulf Coast, killing more than 1,800 people and forcing more than 1 million to evacuate.
Rest of the hour looking back at Hurricane Katrina and at where New Orleans is today. We'll speak with Malik Rahim, founder of Common Ground Relief, as well as journalist Jordan Flaherty. But first, we go back to some of our coverage of Katrina from 20 years ago as we went back and forth to New Orleans. It begins with then New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin.
Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I had better news for you, but we are facing a storm that most of us have feared. Every person is hereby ordered to immediately evacuate the city of New Orleans, or if no other alternative is available, to immediately move to one of the facilities within the city that will be designated as a refuge of last resort.
And the Gulf Coast region remain in a state of catastrophe following the devastating Hurricane Katrina. At least 80% of New Orleans is underwater. The city has no electricity and little drinkable water. Officials say New Orleans will be uninhabitable for weeks. On Tuesday, 2 levees broke, flooding areas of the city that appeared to survive the storm.
This is a national disaster. Get every doggone Greyhound bus line in the country and get their asses moving to New Orleans. That's they thinking small, man, and this is a major, major, major deal.
Talking about tens of thousands of people who are left behind, and those are the sickest, the oldest, poorest, the youngest, the people with disabilities and the like, and the plan was that everybody should leave. Well, you can't leave if you're in a hospital. You can't leave if you're a nurse. You can't leave if you're a patient. You can't leave if you're in a nursing home. You can't leave if you don't have a card.
There are throngs of people, easily in the tens of thousands, maybe 40 to 50,000 people, in my estimation, standing on this plaza, trying to get to a very narrow area where they're being escorted to the buses. I haven't seen one bus leave yet.
Please, babe. 6 and 8 months. The people just walking past us.
No food, no water, no nothing. Whatever we had, we've been taking it. That's the only way we can survive.
We got the food right here. Let me show you right here. All of it, look, right here, look. They won't give us nothing. Nothing. Look, the gate right there. Look, they won't give us nothing. We ain't drinking no ice water, nothing.
This is not about low income. It's not about rich people, poor people. It's about people. Nobody wants to hurt anybody in this city. Nobody wants to hurt these people who have these businesses. And they want a little air and a little food and water, for God's sake. That's it.
There's nobody in charge. The National Guard, there's the police. There is nobody. Somebody needs to come take charge and put organization and get these people to safety, to get them clothes, the basic things that they need to live from day to day.
What, we've been people being killed down here. People telling me the bodies were just lying out in the street. They were shooting each other. The military was shooting. One of my neighbors said the military guy shot at him. So that's what made me not want to come down here.
Federal relief officials have played almost no role. The head of FEMA, Michael Brown, admitted on CNN last night his agency didn't even know that thousands of hungry refugees were inside the convention center. Residents continue to break into stores in search of everything from food and water to guns to luxury items.
Nobody here but us, and we just got to look out for one another. All your politicians, they want to get on TV talking about feeding this person, feeding that person. We ain't seen nothing over there yet.
The White House announced it would have zero tolerance for looters, even for those taking essential items needed to stay alive.
Well, I want zero tolerance for that kind of language being used by leaders of our government to discuss poor people, poor black people who are trying to survive under the most desperate, insane circumstances. I want zero tolerance for thousands of our troops being sent to Iraq when we need them here.
I hate the way they portray us in the media. If you see a black family, it says they're looting. See a white family, it says they're looking for food. George Bush doesn't care about black people.
In Biloxi, Mississippi, the first federal aid arrived only yesterday, 3 full days after the storm wiped out entire sections of the city. In smaller towns in Mississippi, help has still not arrived.
We left for the hurricane and came back Monday night hoping that we could help some people because, I don't know, looking at the response to this storm, particularly initially, there wasn't a lot of outside help, so we decided that really it was up to the people of Jefferson Parish to take the parish back.
What I saw from the federal government was a grand total of 3 boats, Border Patrol agents on 3 boats, 2 airboats and 1 flat-bottom boat. And I saw far more of a response from citizens who had just taken it upon themselves to go and pluck people out of their homes, and they plucked about a dozen out on Saturday.
We don't have any government response here. Everything that's taken place is taken place by volunteers and citizens in the area. Why aren't there 50 inflatable boats in the water working a grid, making sure all these people are out of here? Why is it just volunteers? That's the only people you see around.
FEMA Director Mike Brown is in charge of all federal response and recovery efforts in the field.
And Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job.
Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi has called for your resignation, and I'm wondering if you have a response to that.
The president's in charge of that, not me.
Well, right at the top, you have Michael Brown, and as you mentioned, he was the commissioner of judges at the International Arabian Horse Association. To give you an idea of what he did there, he spent a year investigating whether a breeder performed liposuction on a horse's rear end.
This is an attempt by some in this room to engage in finger pointing and blame game, and I'm just not going to do that. I've made it very clear. And the president spoke about him last week, and his comments stand in terms of what he said about the great work that they've been doing round the clock, 24 hours a day, to help people on the ground.
Excerpts of Democracy Now!'s coverage of Hurricane Katrina 20 years ago. That last speaker was Scott McClellan, who served as spokesperson for then-President George W. Bush. The massive storm struck the Gulf Coast on August 29, 2005. Democracy Now! Soon went down to report from the streets of New Orleans.
One person we interviewed in the neighborhood of Algiers was Malik Rahim, co-founder of the Common Ground Collective. On September 10th, 2005, we aired this report. When Malik took us around the corner from a community health center, he showed us how a corpse still remained on the street. It had been neglected since Hurricane Katrina hit. We asked soldiers and police why the corpse had not been picked up.
Basically smell it from right here. You know, and the police, they pass by, they'll look at it, and but they ain't gonna do nothing, you know, to pick it up.
Malik then walked us down the driveway next to the health center and lifted up a sheet of corrugated metal marked with an X, revealing the dead body underneath.
Now, his body been here for almost 2 weeks, 2 weeks tomorrow. All right, that this body been laying here. And there's no reason for it. Look where we at. I mean, it's not flooded. There's no reason for them to be and left that body right here like this. I mean, that's just totally disrespect. You know, and I mean, 2 weeks. Every day we ask them about come and pick it up. And they refuse to come and pick it up. And you can see it's literally decomposing right here, right out in the sun. Every day we sit up and we ask them about it. Because, I mean, this is closest you could get to tropical climate in America. And they won't do anything with it.
Malik, do you know who this person is?
No. But regardless of who it is, I wouldn't care if it's Saddam Hussein or Bin Laden. Nobody deserves to be left here. And the kids pass by here and they're seeing it. I mean, the elderly, this is what frightened a lot of people into leaving. We don't know if he's a victim of vigilantes or what, but that's all we know is that his body has been allowed to remain out here for over 2 weeks.
We're standing right outside the health clinic. Its doors are chained. The building is not seriously damaged.
No.
Have you reached people there? What authorities have you talked to pick up this body?
We're going to talk to everyone from the Army to the New Orleans police to the state troopers to, I mean, we're going to talk to everybody who we can. I even talked to Oliver Thomas, who was the councilman at large yesterday, about this body. He said he was surprised to see that this body is still there. But it's 2 weeks. 2 weeks that this man been just laying here.
As Malik Rahim was speaking, as if on cue, every level of authority he mentioned drove by. There's a dead body right here. Who are you with?
We're with Bravo 15.
Which is?
The CAV.
Army?
Army, yes, regular Army.
There's a dead body right here. Can you guys pick it up?
I don't think we can pick it up, but we can call the local authorities to come and pick it up.
This gentleman who lives in the neighborhood said that they have been trying to get... Here, let me ask these guys too. Excuse me. Hi, there's a dead body right here. Can Louisiana State Troopers, can you pick it up?
You need to talk to our public information officer, ma'am.
It's been here for 2 weeks. We filmed it last week, and the gentleman over here said he's been trying to get it picked up for 2 weeks, and Louisiana State Troopers, the police, the Army, no one has responded. We're looking right over at it right there.
You need to talk to our public information officer and contact them at the troop.
Your name is?
You need to talk to our public information officer.
Do you know about the body?
You need to talk to our public information officer.
Sir, do you know about the body over there?
Oh, ma'am, you talk with our public information officer.
Do you know what they should do to get this body removed?
I have no idea. I can't tell you. I don't know. There's been several people over here looking at it.
That was Homeland Security that just went by. Sir, what were you saying?
There's been several people over here looking at it, but, you know, like I said, I haven't seen anybody take it.
Several Army guys?
Army. I've seen police over here looking at it. Seen ambulances looking at it. That's about it.
To our knowledge, the body was never identified. Malik Rahim is the co-founder of the Common Ground Collective, which helped bring thousands of people from all over the world to help rebuild New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. He was also one of the founders of the New Orleans chapter.
It's like the perfect encapsulation of the entire Katrina tragedy was the neglect from municipalities and organizations. People left to die, bodies left to be desecrated. I mean, I watched a documentary where there was in boats going around the city, and there's literally like bodies floating in the water. This was an incredible disaster that was left to fester for 3 days, weeks apparently, and when help did come, it was too little too late. 1,800 people had already died. Their homes becoming their watery graves. People ripping apart roofs only to find drowned people in their attics. trying to escape the rising waters but having nowhere to go. And the neighboring racist community not allowing people to cross the bridge into their community. I forget the name of it.
Of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. In 2008, he was a congressional candidate for the Green Party. He's joined us over the years since then. I recently went back to New Orleans and interviewed Malik Rahim again. Malik, we are sitting here at the Memorial Convention Center, where 20 years ago, thousands of people were taking refuge from Hurricane Katrina. Your thoughts on what happened back then and the lessons for today?
Well, I would have to first, I have to thank you for this time. When I think of what happened, not only here, I have to also think about what was happening in Algiers. And I have to think of the role that you in democracy now played at that time. Most mainstream media was sold on the big lie that this city had resorted to anarchy, that it was taken over by thugs, and there was looting, there was murder, there was rapes that was going on. And that now, 20 years later, we know that all this was false. But it was an excuse. It was an excuse in order to rid the city out of people that was no longer tolerated. It was a difference between those who seek safety at the Superdome than those who seek safety here. Because the ones at the Superdome was there seeking safety from Hurricane Katrina. But those that was here, those that was the tens of thousands that was stuck up in this building, wasn't as cool as it is now. Didn't have any air, but they was fleeing a flood, a known flood. They was fleeing hurricane corruption, hurricane racism. You know, that's the hurricane that they was fleeing for, and they wasn't able to bring supplies with them. Most people, when that flood came, that's all they had was the clothes on their back. And then they had to wear these polluted clothes because the water was polluted. The water was toxic. And they had to wear this for days. So I think about the condition of those that was trapped here, and especially the children. You know, as an elder, I can understand, but you know, because I'm in the twilight of my life. I'm 70. I'll be 78 in December, so I'm in the twilight of my life. But to see children trapped up in here and dying needlessly.
Remind me, this was George W. Bush's presidency. He had appointed as the head of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Michael Brown, who was, his specialty was Arabian horses. He was more concerned about the size of his cuffs on his elbows to show that he had rolled up his sleeves. And Bush said to him, what was his congratulatory message to Brown?
I can't remember what the Bush.
Heck of a job, Brownie.
Yeah, something like that.
And what about when the FEMA head, Brown, was asked about the people here at the convention center?
Well, he didn't know they was here.
He said, I don't even know that they're here.
He ran his operation from Baton Rouge. So everything that he was seeing was secondhand. Everything that he was saying was secondhand. He wasn't here. He was and living a life of luxury in Baton Rouge, while people here was dying. You know, so again, it shows what we went through then, but ain't it the sad part about it? it could happen today. Deja vu is alive and well here. Because if a hurricane would happen right now, we are ill prepared for it, the same way we was ill prepared 20 years ago.
That's Malik Rahim just a few weeks ago, sitting with me in the convention center in New Orleans, where so many thousands took refuge from Hurricane Katrina. Malik co-founded the Common Ground Collective, which helped bring thousands of people from all over the world to help rebuild New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. He was also one of the founders of the New Orleans chapter of the Black Panther Party. When we come back, we stay in New Orleans and speak with independent journalist Jordan Flaherty. Back in 20 seconds.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Narmeen Sheikh in New York with Amy Goodman in Telluride, Colorado. We're continuing our coverage of the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, the 2005 storm that devastated the Gulf Coast, killing more than 1,800 people and forcing over 1 million people to evacuate.
We're joined now in New Orleans by independent journalist Jordan Flaherty, who was in New Orleans when the hurricane hit, returned to the city soon after being evacuated to help with relief efforts and to report on what was happening in the streets, particularly to the poor Black communities that were most affected by the hurricane. He's won awards for his reporting on people left behind in the New Orleans City Jail after the hurricane, and is the author of Floodlines, Community and Resistance from Katrina to the Gina 6. He's joined us many times over the years. I was just with you, Jordan, in New Orleans at Netroots Nation, where you moderate a panel on Hurricane Katrina 20 years later. Can you speak now about the aftermath? Talk about what was happening then, from the complete lack of FEMA preparedness or the city's preparedness to climate change, to what happened to this population where more than, well, close to 2,000 people died and 100,000 were evacuated.
Thank you, Amy. And sitting here in this chair, I think about all the people that aren't in this chair, as you say, the people that were displaced, the people that were killed. New Orleans right now has a population of about 360,000. Pre-Katrina, it was about 480,000. And most of that is Black residents. The city has about 120,000 fewer Black residents than it did pre-Katrina. And that period right after the storm, it feels a lot like right now, the way right now we're feeling attacks on everything, on democracy, on the social safety net. That's how it felt after Katrina. We're facing the issues people face everywhere: housing, education, criminal justice, but it was like on hyperspeed. Overnight, you had 80% of the city's housing, unlivable. You had the entire public housing infrastructure shut down. Almost all the public housing was shut down, even that was undamaged. You had our free city hospital was closed down. The entire staff of the school system was fired overnight. 7,500 teachers, the largest union in the city, that union representing the teachers, ceased to be recognized. The schools were moved from control of the school board, so under electoral control, to a mostly charter system. You had the governor say, I'm sending in National Guard troops. They're locked and loaded. They've been trained to shoot to kill, and I expect they will. And the voices of especially Black New Orleanians were not heard. I know that you've lifted up voices like Norris Henderson, Monique Harden, Tracy Washington, Sonny Patterson, people that were on the front lines of this struggle, artists, organizers, scholars, incredible landscape of people fighting for this city. And people won real victories in that struggle. And, it's hard living in the city, but I've learned so much from the grassroots organizers on the front line that were fighting for justice for this city.
And Jordan, could you talk about what happened with the the federal funding that was given to New Orleans in the aftermath of Katrina, more than $140 billion, which is the largest post-disaster domestic recovery effort in U.S. history. What happened to that funding?
You know, it felt in that period as if like the sky was filled with money. As you say, all this money that came from the government and also from people that were donating. It was like it flew over our heads and then got redirected. So we didn't actually get to, the people most in need didn't actually receive it. So much of that money went to the Bush cronies like Kellogg, Brown and Root and Halliburton. Of the 25 nonprofits that received the most money for Gulf Coast aid, half of them were based outside of the Gulf Coast. There was all of people giving money, the government giving money. If you look at the Louisiana Road Home Program, which was state administered and federally funded, one of the biggest sources of funding, it just went to homeowners, which were certainly in need, but what about renters? What about the homeless? And even among homeowners, white homeowners got 35% more aid on average than black homeowners. So the people most in need, the people that were most highly victimized, the neighborhoods that were most in need, received the least aid. And much of that aid that was allocated, it took years to come through, some of it through mismanagement, other reasons. Some of that money still has not come.
You know, the criminalization of storm survivors. On the one hand, they're left to drown. 1,800 people died in Hurricane Katrina. When did the federal authorities come out? How were the people who were so desperate, as thousands went into the convention center, into the Superdome, how were they seen? We just saw excerpts of our coverage where people were talking about black people described as looters, white people described as desperately trying to find food for their families. The National Guard coming out, being told to shoot to kill. Describe that whole scene, including the Danziger Bridge, that famous incident attack by police.
Danziger Bridge, it's hard to even talk about. You know, these police came rolling up to a group of unarmed civilians. We found out later that the police thought that they were coming onto another scene, and they just started shooting to kill. James Brissett, 17 years old, killed by police. Ronald Madison, mentally challenged man, killed. Others that were there wounded. The police just went up, opened fire. And it was years before that story was even told by most of the media. It was mostly ignored. And when it was ignored, and when it wasn't ignored, they just told the police's end of the story. It was finally in 2008 that we really had some federal investigations of police violence in that period after the storm. But for years, our media failed to investigate. And historically, New Orleans media has failed to investigate issues in the black community, issues of police violence. The New Orleans Times-Picayune, what was once our daily paper here, did not cover these stories, did not care about these stories. We saw it over and over and over again. Many of the people working in that paper were closer to police than they were to community members. One photographer testified that he knew things about police behavior that he didn't report at the time. They did not do their responsibility to tell the story. And as I said before, the voices of Black New Orleanians were not heard. The people who created the culture that we feel in this whole world, the music of New Orleans, the culture, they're still living here. Their voices are not heard. People are working for minimum wage jobs or less. They are living in a city with poor infrastructure. You know that if you live here, you will live in an amazing place, but also you will probably die sooner. You'll probably make less money. You'll probably have less educational opportunities. Several years ago, it was reported that one of the zip codes in New Orleans had a life expectancy of 55 years. We live right near Cancer Alley, where the chemical processing plants cause high cancer rates, especially in that area, and also right near here. Those same oil and gas companies are responsible for coastal erosion. We're losing, for years it's been estimated, about a football field of land every 45 minutes, this coastal erosion, much of that caused by the oil and gas pipelines that bring the salt water into the freshwater marshes. That makes us more vulnerable to hurricanes. Of course, climate change makes us more vulnerable. And this current administration is doing everything to make us more vulnerable, including, as you've recently reported, gutting FEMA once again.
And talk about the significance of that, Jordan. I mean, as Malik Rahim, who Amy Goodman spoke to, as he said, and you've just repeated, that something like Katrina could happen very easily again. And specifically these cuts to FEMA, because poor climate vulnerable states like Louisiana received the most direct assistance from FEMA between January 2015, that is, so almost 10 years after Hurricane Katrina, between January 2015 and April 2024. So what will this mean for the city and for the state?
It's devastating. It's devastating. The support for the oil and gas industry, the heightened climate change, hurricanes getting bigger, hurricanes getting stronger, less land to protect us in the city, less infrastructure to support us, less of a social safety net, less medical, a huge increase in policing. You know, one of the victories that organizers won here after Hurricane Katrina was shrinking the size of the city jail, was getting oversight over, federal oversight over the police department, also an independent police monitor, federal oversight over the jail. All of those kind of things are going out the window. Our new governor is pushing to undo decades of reform of policing, of the prison industrial complex in the state. More people getting locked up, more people being criminalized, less ways to afford to live in this city, in this country.
Jordan, before we go, I'm just interrupting because we have less than a minute. Talk about the prisoners, people held in the parish jails, what they faced at that time, often just awaiting trial, stuck in the dark, in the filth.
Right. We're talking about many people who had just been arrested a day or two before for some minor charge like public drunkenness. The city jail before Katrina was the largest city jail in the country, 7,000 people being held there. The New Orleans police were arresting 60,000 people every year. That's in a city of less than 500,000 people. Do the math on that. You had 95% of those arrested were arrested for nonviolent offenses. When the floodwaters were rising, people were left to die. When they finally were rescued, they were shipped to maximum security prisons around the state, like Angola State Prison. Many people were lost in the system for months. I remember nearly a year later, advocates found a woman who had been lost in the system. She didn't even know why she'd been arrested.
Jordan, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but we will continue covering the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us. Jordan Flaherty, New Orleans-based independent journalist and film producer, author of Floodlines. Thanks so much for joining us. More of our coverage tomorrow.
Let's see if there's any four more Palestinians starved to death as Israeli tanks advance on the city.
And Ali is a journalist for the Electronic Intifada. He's done amazing work, and they're one of the ones that did not repeat the outlandish October 7th sexual assault hoax. They're one of the ones that didn't fall for that. So they've done really great work. And you all know who Mehdi Hassan is. Mehdi Hassan was on MSNBC, and then, they kind of pushed him out of there after October 7th, along with others. And then he went on to start a company called Zateo, where he's kind of doing his own thing, where they have like a YouTube channel, and I believe there's written journalism as well. So this is what went down. Basically, to make a long story short, Mehdi Hassan is upset that some people are giving Marjorie Taylor Greene credit for calling a genocide and not giving credit to AOC. So let's see where this all starts. Here's Mehdi Hassan here. I'm sorry, but the new love for Marjorie Taylor Greene from some pro-Palestine folks combined with the hate for AOC is insane. Abu Nima, that's Ali. Ali has spent the past 22 months attacking AOC, calling her a fraud, but now says thank you to Marjorie Taylor Greene.
She is a fraud. And we're only praising her, and we're only praising Marjorie Taylor Greene in utter disbelief that that's how the tables have turned.
Let's just compare their Israel-Gaza record, shall we? So let's pause there, because I think Mehdi's being disingenuous here. So here's the thing. The reason why people like Ali are saying thank you to Marjorie Taylor Greene is because she's doing something that we did not expect her to do. Most of the conservatives in DC, most of them are not speaking out against what Israel is doing. Most of them are not calling it a genocide, and we didn't expect them to. We expect AOC and Bernie and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and all them, we expect them to call it a genocide because they don't take money from AIPAC. They were a part of DSA. DSA had this policy, against visiting Israel, et cetera. We don't have to go through all that again, but you guys know where I'm getting from there. But we expect to hear that from them. We don't expect it from Marjorie Taylor Greene. And even when I covered it, even I said Marjorie Taylor Greene's criticism for Israel is mild, but she's still saying it's a genocide when the rest of her colleagues are not. Right? So let's go on and see what else he's saying here. AOC called for a ceasefire shortly after October 7th. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't, and said anyone that is pro-Palestinian is pro-Hamas, and filed a censure resolution against Rashida Tlaib, calling her anti-Semitic and pro-terrorist. This is true. I covered that when it happened. AOC was one of only 9 House members to vote against a blindly pro-Israel resolution in the wake of October 7th. Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of the co-sponsors of that pro-Israel resolution. AOC voted again and again to restrict arms to Israel in 2024. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't. AOC boycotted Netanyahu's speech to Congress in 2024. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't. AOC first called out the genocide in Gaza on the House floor in March of 2024. Marjorie Taylor Greene said the G word for the first time only a few weeks ago. AOC defended pro-Palestine students on campus. Marjorie Taylor Greene called for their deportation. And most recently, Marjorie Taylor Greene put out a doctored image of a niqab on the Statue of Liberty after Zohar Mandami won the NYC primary. That Islamophobic tweet is still up. But Ali says thank you to her and compares her record on Gaza favorably to AOC's, because Marjorie Taylor Greene said a few anti-Israeli things in recent weeks and did one good vote after nearly 2 years of backing Israel and voting to arm and fund the genocide. We're now expected to believe that Marjorie Taylor Greene is a hero and AOC is a villain on Gaza. Like I said, insane. So.
No, we're not. Who is giving Marjorie Taylor Greene that much credit? AOC should feel ashamed that Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people, is better than her on this topic than her. AOC should feel like the fake progressive that she is. She didn't say shit about Mahmoud Khalil when he first got arrested. Didn't hear you mention that, Mehdi Hassan, when a bunch of Democratic lawmakers signed a petition demanding his release because it was illegal. You said, you, AOC, said, you need more information. You needed the go-ahead from the establishment. You were waiting for your cue from someone else. We don't need that kind of spinelessness in the progressive movement. She's a grifter just like Bernie Sanders, who can't call it a genocide either.
let's stop there for just a second, and then we'll get to what Ali.
Yes, I'm sorry. Even if you still think you're doing the right thing, it's all for naught, and you're trying to make money off of it at the same time. This fight oligarchy tour is gonna go nowhere. Because AOC is not the savior that people think she is. So yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene is, I wouldn't say less reprehensible. They're both reprehensible in their own ways.
He said here. So again, to my point, we expected AOC to do those things. It's like giving someone a cookie for doing their job. Like, we expect that. The reason why people are like, whoa, well, thank you, Marjorie Taylor Greene, is because we did not expect her to do this. Yeah, she did come after the pro-Palestinian protesters. I covered that. I told you, like, when she was calling it genocide, I was like, remember, she was the one that came after, like, a lot of us and stuff like that. Now she sees differently, right? And under a Trump administration. So my whole thing is, the applause that MTG is getting is because we did not expect it. We expect it from AOC and from Bernie Sanders. And to be fair, when he's talking about the way that AOC has voted, he omits the fact that she voted for the defense of Israel. She still voted to protect the Iron Dome, which we've seen her.
Exactly.
For me, I had the experience of...
It just sounds like you're justifying anti-Semitism.
I don't know who the fuck Richie Torres is. He's a representative? Whoa, a damning interview on Israel.
For me, I had the experience of...
It just sounds like you're justifying anti-Semitism, which making me feel like...
Are you crazy right now?
This is one of the most revealing interviews I have seen with a politician this year, and it was conducted by...
Adam is Jewish. What are you talking about, Richie? What do you mean you're justifying anti-Semitism? Why would Adam Friedland want to do that?
By a comedian, Adam Friedland, who hosts the Adam Friedland Show, a former host of the Come Town podcast. Somebody who hosted a show called the Come Town podcast did a better job at interviewing a politician than the vast majority of the press. Oh, yeah. And the biggest reason for that is because...
First we had Crystal Ball holding Alyssa Slotkin to the fire. Straight up drank her spinal fluid. And then here we got Adam Friedland batting around Richie Torres like a cat toy.
Adam Friedland showcases humanity.
I say that because Adam Friedland is so, like, he's a gentle boy. He's, you know, he's a young boy.
Empathy and actual care for human rights. While Richie Torres, you're going to witness here just how insane the reaction is. So I got a couple of clips from this interview. I will link to the full thing below the video. The real tension begins around the 40-minute mark, but I think it's worth watching the whole thing to get an understanding of the beginning of the discussion and where Richie Torres comes from, because he's somebody who has faced adversity growing up, yet clearly has been unable to develop the ability to empathize. So it's worth noting before I get to the first clip here that this is a story that came out this week from Sludge. Torres invested in weapons makers as he backed billions in arms for Israel. Reminder, this is a Democratic congressman in New York that is incredibly conservative. So, you know, just as an aside here, this seems ripe for a primary challenge, but Dropsite has the summary here, and worth noting, Sludge and Dropsite both do fantastic reporting, fantastic journalism. Check out both and make sure you follow them both. They write here, while urging Biden to rush bombs for Israel's genocide and voting for a $17 billion arms package to the apartheid state, Richie Torres also secretly bought stock in weapons giants that were supporting Israel, and the trades were also filed nearly a year late. All the while, Torres loudly opposed a ceasefire, joined Republicans to override Biden's brief pause on 2,000-pound bombs, and voted to sanction the ICC after it issued arrest warrants for Israeli leaders. Just absolutely insane moves. And not surprising, he has received quite a bit of money.
Dude, that's like, he's in like the top 3 or top 5. Oh my God. Completely bought and paid for.
From AIPAC to the tune of over $1.5 million. Let me get to the first clip here where this really, so this is a few minutes into their conversation around Israel and Gaza, and just the response that Torres comes back with here is just insane.
I think hatred of Jewish people has exploded in this country. And I don't think I think it's because it's of our support of what looks to be an absolute brutality. And I think that...
You think that's a justification for anti-Semitism?
Here's the thing.
You think Israeli government policy is a justification for anti-Semitism? My view is there's no justification for anti-Semitism.
I think that...
There's zero justification for anti-Semitism.
Okay, you're deflecting again.
I'm not deflecting, that's my position.
What does it look like to have a flag with a Jewish star and I'm Jewish? And for kids to be starving right now? Why is my government... I don't want to do this fight. Let's not do like a yelling at each other thing. I really just... For me, I had the experience of...
It just sounds like you're justifying anti-Semitism, which making me feel like...
Are you crazy right now?
Okay.
I don't know whether to laugh or cry at the reaction from Richie Torres. Adam Friedland has lived in Israel. He is Jewish. The idea that he's justifying anti-Semitism by pointing out the reality of what is happening is insane. Discussing the results of an action is not a justification for the action. It's simply a discussion of cause and effect. I think we know it's the Israeli government, not Jewish people, that are the ones committing these actions. But when the average person is being told that any criticism of the Israeli government is inherently somehow anti-Semitic, do you think that helps or hurts the fight against anti-Semitism? So this whole, like the complete disconnect that Richie Torres displays from reality. Look, I know we shouldn't be surprised, considering if you have any awareness at all of Richie Torres. I discussed his votes earlier, the things he advocates for. It should not be surprising, but just seeing it like this, seeing this interview where you have one person that is a human who shows empathy, who is a real, genuine individual in Adam Friedland, and another who is at best a robot. It is just such a stark contrast. Let me get to, so I'm actually going to show 2 more clips because I split this one into 2. So here is a continuation of that discussion.
If you have disagreements with the Israeli government, you should voice your criticism of the Israeli government, but there is no justification for intimidation or harassment against American Jews.
I'm telling you as a Jew right now that we are receiving a lot more hate because of what the people with the flag that has a Jewish star on are doing to other people right now. I'm telling you, as a Jewish person, how painful it is for us to say, and it hurts my stomach to say this. So you're going to say, I disagree, that this is a genocide. And that hurts to say that a Jew could do that. It hurts because we grew up with learning about what hatred is. We grew up learning about this.
All right, so before I get to the last clip, which I think really just completely exposes Richie Torres in an insane moment, I want to discuss why Adam Friedland here is so effective in this interview. So I've worked in broadcast news, both locally and nationally. I used to host a radio show. A lot of people in these traditional media spaces are taught to keep their feelings out of their reporting, which under certain circumstances I think could make sense, but that also leads to a situation where you are removing empathy from your reporting. So you're left with reports that are based on what some institution says, many of which could be corrupt. So, these news reports.
Yeah, I don't understand that ideal at all. Like, maybe keep your emotions out of your weather report, like, don't bring your baggage to the table. But when there's something like kids being hurt, I mean, not showing emotion is... You're doing propaganda for the perpetrators, I think. You would show emotion about a serial killer claiming the lives of children. Why wouldn't you show that empathy for a country? Why wouldn't you have that exact same horror and disgust that you would towards a serial killer killing children? Why wouldn't you also have that towards a country that's doing the same thing on a much larger scale? Israel is a serial killer state of women and children. They rape and murder. They steal. Israel is the Zionist entity has to be destroyed forever, or we will never be able to heal as humanity. We will never be able to rid the stench of genocide from our planet.
Media discussions are often based around, oh, the police said this. The Israeli government said this. The White House said this. Okay, but what is behind that? Why are they saying that? What is influencing that decision to say that? And what is the truth? And are we centering human rights in this reporting? Or are we just discussing, this is what they said, this is what they said? Which, again, strips out the empathy, strips out the humanity from reports. People like Adam Friedland, Jon Stewart, great example as well. They're able to re-inject humanity into discussions around politics and news, which is why they are so effective, because they recenter what is important. Let me get to the last clip here, which again, this is just wild.
I mean, Hamas murdered thousands of people, so there's no...
So what does that mean?
That Hamas is a terrorist organization for murdering innocent children and civilians.
How many civilians have been killed in this war?
The war is a tragedy, but
90% of them have been. But 90% of them have been civilians. They've killed journalists. They've killed journalists.
People have been killed in a war. It's been a tragedy.
They've killed people waiting for aid.
But you're suggesting that it is the policy of the Israeli government to murder civilians, and that is a notion that I reject.
You gotta listen, man. You gotta be like a human being about this.
People who are dying in the war, which to me is a tragedy, because war is a tragedy.
Do you feel in your heart that this is what you're saying is right?
If you remove Hamas,
you don't actually think that.
I told you what I believe. Don't tell me what.
He sold what he believes for 1.5 mil. He sold his heart.
What I believe. I've told you what I believe.
Why would you believe that?
Because there are people who see the world differently. I know it's a shock to you, but there are people who see the world differently.
The absolute tonal change from when Richie Torres is discussing the Israeli citizens killed on October 7th to the tens of thousands and estimates putting it up around 300,000 civilian deaths in Gaza. The tonal change between those two discussions is incredible. And it's all under the guise of, oh, it's a war. It's a war, so it's okay. Gaza doesn't have a military. What kind of war is this? A one-sided war. It's a genocide. How many civilian deaths have there been in Israel since October 7th? 0. So how is that a war? We are talking about a one side doing the killing. And he simply does not care. These are the marks of a sociopath. He's doing what he thinks is necessary for his own career, even though I don't think it's going to help his career. But he thinks he's doing what's necessary for his career, and he's going to justify that however he can in these sorts of interviews. And when he tries to, he comes off looking like the absolute clown that he is. Just disgusting. So Ashley Reese shared this question on Twitter that I think is worth thinking about. I mostly want to know why Richie agreed to be interviewed. Great question, because he does not come out of this interview looking good, obviously. I tend to think, just much like the Alyssa Slotkin interview when she went on Breaking Points, and Crystal Ball had a similar discussion where she was bringing up empathy and, human rights, and Alyssa Slotkin just did not seem to care. I don't think these politicians are aware of what they're getting into. I know they're being told, for good reason, that they need to connect more with social media and go to these online shows and try to connect with a different audience, a younger audience, because they're not reaching different people when they keep going on these traditional news outlets. But at the same time, that only works if you are a politician who actually cares, who is centered in human rights, in workers' rights. If you don't care about the issues, if you don't care about what the actual problems in society and the world are, then these sorts of interviews are not going to help you just because you're there. You have to actually be somebody, a different kind of politician. So I don't think Richie Torres knew what he was getting into. I think he saw Adam Freeland. I think he had a recent New Yorker, I think that was the magazine, had a recent cover story of him. So I thought, hey, this is a up and coming, millennial. He's being called the millennial Jon Stewart. Let me go do an interview with him. It'll be good. I don't think he really understood that people in these spaces, be it Adam Freeland, be it Crystal Ball, have a real connection both to reality, the facts, and humanity. And these politicians simply do not know how to deal with that.
Earlier today, Venezuela announced the deployment of drones, soldiers, and a number of naval vessels to counter what they believe is a coming U.S. military operation with a goal of regime change. So let's get into what we know. Starting out, this video is shared by the Venezuelan defense minister, and according to some reporting in CBS News in an article titled, "Venezuela deploys warships, drones after U.S. sends guided missile destroyers to the region." Quote, "In a video on social media, Venezuela Defense Minister announced a significant drone deployment as well as naval patrols along its Caribbean coast, including larger vessels further north in our territorial waters. Venezuela's Defense Minister, Pedro Lopez, ordered the deployment of drones, naval vessels, and 15,000 troops to border waters and rivers, reacting to U.S. warships in the Caribbean. Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, labeled the presence of a U.S. nuclear submarine a, quote, grave threat to regional stability, and on Tuesday, Caracas petitioned the United Nations to intervene in the dispute by demanding the immediate cessation of the U.S. military deployment in the Caribbean. A couple key notes here. In terms of firepower and capabilities, Venezuela is far outmatched by the United States. That's not close. That's not really up for debate. And likely any sort of attack against the U.S. military in international waters right now would result in catastrophic consequences for Maduro and his regime. No doubt. One thing to keep in mind here when looking at the drones in Venezuela, best to consider these along the lines of what the Houthis were using off the coast of Yemen. So the Iranian Shahed-style drones or the Russian Garan-style large one-way attack-style drones, inexpensive drones. There has been talk, even mentioned by Secretary of State Marco Rubio in recent months, that Venezuela is trying to stand up their own domestic manufacture of those drones. It's not clear if they have, and it's not clear if they've been on the receiving end of exports from Iran or Russia. They are close allies with those two nations, as well as China, but I haven't seen anything to suggest they actually have those munitions on hand. Either way, the major concern at this point, if we're looking at what could lead to broader escalation, would be the use of those long-range drones against U.S. military vessels in international waters as they approach Venezuelan territorial waters. I would not right now list as a significant concern of Venezuela trying in any way, shape, or form to necessarily attack the United States. Now, Venezuelan President Maduro put out a statement saying, quote, "What they're threatening to do against Venezuela, a government change, a military terrorist attack, is immoral, criminal, and illegal. Anyone who commits an act of aggression against a country in Latin America is attacking all countries." Now, it's worth mentioning what the U.S. military buildup in the region is, and it's changing. And from what I can tell, from the initial order to today, it has ramped up pretty significantly. Quoting Eric Schmidt in the New York Times a couple days ago, he said, quote, "U.S. officials said up to 3 guided missile destroyers would soon arrive in the region. The naval warships will target boats operated by drug cartels transporting fentanyl to the United States. They have not yet said how they will do so." So the stated U.S. mission here is really twofold.
And another thing that's beyond words, I think, is what Israel continues to do to journalists. This weekend, at least, or just this week, sorry, at least 21 people, including 5 journalists who were killed, over 50 injured in a double tap strike on Nasser Hospital. What are your thoughts on this as a journalist yourself, and on Israel's kind of intentional elimination and targeting of journalists in Gaza?
It's horrifying. I mean, every single time a journalist is killed, and I should start out by saying Israel is the leading killer of journalists in the world in modern history. So a Brown University study, a very important study, came out showing, and this isn't even that recent, it was several months ago that it came out, so which shows you the scale of these atrocities, showed that Israel has killed more journalists in Gaza than in the U.S. Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, the Korea War, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Yugoslavia combined. That is how many journalists Israel has killed in Gaza. You're talking about, if you're looking at the Committee to Protect Journalists, just under 200. If you're looking at higher numbers, which are likely the more accurate ones coming out of Gaza, you're talking about a minimum of 240 journalists. This is a staggering number, and it's systematic, and it's targeted, and it's deliberate. They have threatened many of these journalists for months before killing them. They have smeared them in death and in life sometimes, and they have lied about why they've killed them. I don't even know where to begin, except to say that sometimes when you hear about the killing of a journalist, you think, might this be the time that people are finally going to demand that this stop? We thought maybe it was the killing of our colleague Ismail al-Ghul in July of 2024, when Israel hit him so hard that he actually was beheaded and his own colleagues saw his head separated from his body. Maybe it was the killing of 19-year-old Hassan Hamad in his home. Hassan was in his own room uploading material. He worked for a production company called Mediatown, which we actually partner with on all of our films at Fault Lines, an incredible Palestinian Gaza-based production company. Hassan was targeted with a drone in his own home, 19 years old. And by the time his colleagues found his body, they could only collect some parts and put them in a small bag. That's how shredded his body was. Or maybe it was the killing of Anas al-Sharif, Al Jazeera's most prominent journalist, on August 10th. He was the most famous face in Gaza, and if Israel can get away with killing him, they can really get away with killing any journalist. Again, they smeared him as a Hamas operative, which is a patent lie. It's absolutely untrue. And of course, that didn't stop them, because yesterday they killed 5 more journalists. And actually, after that attack you talked about, the double tap strike at Nasser Hospital, they also killed another journalist in his tent. So this is just unending. It's horrific. It's outrageous. And for the most part, I see silence from the media industry in the West. Not just silence. Sometimes I see an outright justification of these killings. And talk about adding insult to injury. When a state like Israel can get away with killing the highest number of journalists ever killed in any one place in modern history, that puts a target on the back of every single journalist anywhere in the world. It makes all journalists unsafe. And rather than give these Palestinian journalists their solidarity, their support, rather than demand that Israel stop killing them, rather than demand that Israel be punished and sanctioned for these killings, sometimes we see Western journalists actually amplifying Israeli lies and justifications for these killings.
I do also want to show a very disturbing clip. This is chief commentator Zvi Yehekzavel from channel I-24 in Israel. Here's what he had to say about Gaza-based journalists. He said this live on air. And if Israel has already decided to eliminate the journalists, then better late than never. Just to be clear, these are journalists who hide in hospitals, who set up war rooms there, who broadcast to the world a completely distorted picture, still serving Hamas's interests. You could say that the spearhead of Hamas's military wing are those Nukba journalists. Therefore, Israel did well to eliminate them. In my view, it was too late, and there are still many, many more who continue to cause image and perceptual damage in a battle that, unfortunately, we are not particularly excelling in. I like that idea that it's like they're just bad at PR. The problem isn't that they're killing, murdering children, leading in child amputations, as you know from your work. It's just a question of ER and damage control. But what are your thoughts, about this insane statement that, again, you'd think that people would say this behind closed doors, but they actually broadcast it?
It's heinous. It's a heinous, outrageous smear. And there's a reason that after the Holocaust, people who were working in media were prosecuted for incitement to genocide and violence. There's a reason that even in the Rwanda genocide, journalists were also put on trial. This is just an example of that, and of that dehumanization, the smears, the lies that are used to fuel Israel's campaign of violence, that it's unleashed its campaign of terror for nearly 2 years in Gaza. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have so many different organs and elements of the state, including, unfortunately, journalists, so-called journalists in Israel, who are inciting violence against fellow journalists. It's disgusting, it's disappointing, but at the same time, when you look at opinion polls, a vast majority of Israelis actually support
Exactly.
Gaza.
Yeah, that's insane. The fact that, it's like in some cases, as a US citizen, I always appreciate that people are able to distinguish between governments and societies. But honestly, like I had someone on the show who's both a friend and a guest, and he's one of the subjects in this documentary I'm making about Holocaust survivors and their descendants who are speaking out against genocide. He's the son of Holocaust survivors. He says that this is the most democratic genocide in history because of the level of support for it. And as you just pointed out, polling from earlier of August, shows that 76% of Israeli Jews think there are no innocents in Gaza. I don't know what to say about that, except there's a sickness there. What do you think is stopping journalists here from speaking out? Because I think that if this were in any other country, there would be moments of silence. There would be calls from our government. There would be calls, like extremely strong condemnations. And it's obviously not strong enough because you just had this person announcing that there should and will be more of these murderous attacks.
You've seen a very organized campaign to actually delegitimize Palestinian journalists, to paint them as biased, as unprofessional, as Hamas, even as fighters. And they don't even need evidence provided by the Israeli military. Unfortunately, Israel's word is enough, even though Israel has repeatedly lied to journalists. Well before October 7th, 2023, we have ample examples of Israel lying to journalists time and again, whether it was in 2021 when they told a group of journalists that they were going to go into Gaza with ground troops. And then in reality, they admitted that they actually lied and that they wanted Hamas fighters to go underground and they wanted to bomb them in their tunnels. They admitted, they said, yeah, we used the media. Haha, isn't that great? Or when they killed my Al Jazeera colleague, Shireen Abu Akleh in 2022 and repeatedly lied about that and only were forced to admit that they were the ones who killed her after many investigations. Shireen's killing was the most investigated killing of any Palestinian in history. So many different news organizations actually looked into it. My own team at Fault Lines, but also CNN and New York Times and Washington Post and United Nations and Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, everything you can imagine, B'Tselem, everybody investigated her killing. And it was only after all those investigations was Israel finally, with their back to the wall, able to admit that it was actually one of their soldiers. But even then, there was no accountability. There was nothing. So despite its very long track record of outright lying to and misleading journalists still believe them. And let me give you the latest outrageous example. And unfortunately, there is no shortage of examples. Every single day, there are examples of Western legacy media taking what the Israeli military says, and even though it makes no sense, no logical sense, and publishing it without any question, without actually reporting out those claims. Just today, the Israeli military and government came out and said that when they attacked Nasser Hospital complex, it was because of a Hamas camera that was on the roof that they were actually trying to get. Well, first of all, what is a Hamas camera? Second of all, it was verified that that's actually the Reuters live stream position. The Reuters and AP live stream position is what they attacked. So first of all, we know that they attacked the Reuters and live stream position. And secondly, let's say it was true and it was a Hamas camera. Again, so many logical problems with that. Number one, why is it 2 strikes? If you're only going after the camera, why do you then go and strike again and kill that group of journalists and the rescue workers that came to check on the first journalist who was attacked? Number two, if you're saying that your intelligence is so good and you know exactly that this is a Hamas camera and you're going after the Hamas camera, wouldn't your intelligence also show a group of journalists and a group of rescue workers that you then went on to attack? It makes no sense. They don't actually report out the claims that Israel makes. Instead, what does Reuters do? Again, an AP, it is their live position. They put in the headline, Israel says they were attacking a Hamas camera. This is stenography. This is not journalism. It is embarrassing. It is unprofessional. And it aids and abets genocide when they're constantly regurgitating what a state that's plausibly accused of committing genocide says to justify its ongoing mass killing campaign.
It is beyond disgusting. And the double tap thing, which is like such a disgusting, it's almost like a casual way of describing it, a double tap thing. You're just like killing people. And then when they're rescue workers coming, you're killing them. And not even afraid to be doing that and not feel embarrassed to be doing that because they won't face any consequences. And there was that other journalist from Al Jazeera who he was forced to bleed to death over the course of a few hours because they just,
December 2023.
And we don't no one knows that name. No one knows what you're talking about except for people who follow this really closely. Imagine if Russia had done that. Imagine if Russia had shot a Ukrainian journalist, and then as aid workers and ambulances tried to get to that Ukrainian journalist to save that journalist's life, they killed the rescuers, and that journalist was bleeding out over the course of a few hours. I mean, it would be nonstop coverage, and rightfully nonstop coverage, and rightfully nonstop condemnation. And we actually have these headlines referring to the stenography that you just referred to. So, and this is the great Asal Rod gathered this. She tweeted, "I can't believe these are real headlines. Israel bombed the hospital twice, killing journalists and rescue workers on video for everyone to see. And Western media tries to justify it by saying they were targeting a Hamas camera. This is not journalism. It's embarrassing." And then you see, let's just click through some of them. So the AP, Israeli military says strikes on Gaza hospital targeted what it says was a Hamas camera. Reuters, initial inquiry says Hamas camera was targeted of Israeli strike that killed journalists. Next, CNN, IDF's initial inquiry into Gaza hospital strike claims troops identified Hamas camera. And then Sky News, Gaza latest, Israel claims troops saw Hamas camera before deadly hospital attack. And again, just imagine if this was a Russian thing. Imagine any comparable headlines, right?
Absolutely. I share your outrage, and I wish everyone was as outraged. Can we also just take a step back and acknowledge the fact that the first journalist killed in that strike was a Reuters journalist.
Oh, yeah.
He was working for them. And they're helping to cover up the killing of their own journalists. Maryam Abu Daqqa, 33 years old, was working for the Associated Press. The Associated Press minimizes her role with them by calling her a freelancer, doesn't even put her name in a headline. I mean, to your point, everybody should know these names. But part of dehumanization is to gloss over these atrocities, is to minimize them, is to whitewash them, is to help Israel justify and rationalize them. And the fact that we know so little about all of these journalists, they were somebody's entire universe. Anas al-Sharif was only 28 years old. He had so many opportunities to leave Gaza. In fact, his own family, after he was killed, said that he was told a few days before he was killed, "We can help you leave Gaza, just stop reporting," and he refused. That is heroic. That is the pinnacle of what you would consider a journalist of integrity, of professional commitment, of courage and bravery. Maryam Abu Daqqa had been separated from her 12-year-old son for a year and a half before she was killed. All of these journalists have written wills to their loved ones, to their colleagues, last statements and last words. The fact that all of them have taken the time to actually write their last will and testament, the words that they wish to be remembered by, tells you everything about this killing campaign that Israel has unleashed on the journalists of Gaza. I just want to say that these are the most incredible, devoted, caring, generous people that you can imagine. All they want to do is bear witness and tell the story and continue the coverage, because to them it's a mission that's intrinsic to who they are, regardless of the sacrifice. They're doing all of this. They're covering everything happening in Gaza while suffering the same thing. They've been displaced from their homes so many times, having to sleep in tents. They've been starved. They've been injured. They've lost loved ones, separated from their family members. They have no offices, no equipment. And we're not talking about a few months. This has been going on for almost 2 years. And, you know, their professionalism has been sort of impugned or questioned, whether they're actually journalists. And in fact, in my experience, they're so much more professional than some of the journalism that you see in these legacy newspapers that actually turns out to have been completely debunked. And I'm thinking specifically of some of the October 7th atrocity propaganda that helped lead us to this moment. And just to give you one small example, when we were working on The Night Won't End, I was in touch with a journalist in Gaza who thankfully is still alive. I very much, pray for his safety because nobody is safe. This journalist has said, we feel that these are our last days. And the fact that they could just say that says so much. But we were talking about covering a case of a field execution because we'd heard that Israeli soldiers were actually going into Palestinian homes in Gaza, separating the men from the women and children, and then executing the men in front of the women and children, or sometimes executing the women, depending on the different cases. And he had heard about a case and went to go cover it, but we asked him about who the eyewitnesses were. And he said, well, there was one neighbor who heard but didn't see anything, so I didn't interview him. Imagine if in these legacy media, legacy newsrooms, if they had that level of professionalism in terms of what actually counts for serious journalism in pursuit of the truth and facts, and not just regurgitating propaganda given to you by a state that's accused of genocide.
We have photos of some of the intrepid journalists who were killed, and I do want to show their images because I think that's important.
Hassam al-Masri was the Reuters journalist who was the first person killed. Maryam Abu Daqqa is the journalist I mentioned who's 33 years old, who left behind a 12-year-old son. She worked for the Associated Press. Muaz Abu Taha was a freelance journalist who worked with several news organizations. And this is really important. Just days before he was killed, worked on an incredible piece that 972 magazine did about starvation in Gaza, which makes you think this is not accidental. These people are targeted. Mohammed Salama was my colleague at Al Jazeera, incredible journalist. He refused to leave Nasser Hospital Complex. He stayed there until the end, and he documented so many atrocities there. And when they kill these journalists, they not only kill the eyes and ears, and they not only stop the coverage, which I think is the intention, they also kill the memory, because these journalists should have been present in war crimes investigations to testify. They were eyewitnesses to crimes that they themselves reported and authentic and documented, and now they're gone. And I think that's part of the intention here in silencing them, is silencing eyewitnesses.
I think I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to support the channel, like the video and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.